Hi everyone, welcome and good morning to our Children in Scotland webinar on understanding children's rights and additional support requirements, which will be led by Emma Rogan today. Maybe Emma, you can wave into the camera and say hello. Emma works for Children, and we've got Sarah Jane Crucy as well from Partners in Advocacy, and both are involved in the delivery and coordination of the My Rights, My Say children's views and advocacy services, but I'm sure you'll introduce yourself shortly as well. I'm Svenja, I'm a learning and events officer at Children in Scotland. If you don't know anything about us, we are a national charity. We're working to improve children's lives, and we're also a membership organisation. So we're trying to bring together a network of people working with and for children, young people and families across Scotland and beyond. One of our key priorities is to strengthen the children's sector workforce, which we do by providing training and learning events, including conferences, study visits, training workshops, seminars, everything really. But since face-to-face meetings or training courses aren't possible at the moment, we're now delivering our program online, just like this webinar today. It's been a real learning experience for us, for our trainers as well, and probably for you all as well. So thanks so much for your patience and your enthusiasm and for giving this a go. I'm very thankful to the Scottish Government who have enabled us to deliver this webinar for free for you. And we really hope that it'll be a useful experience, plenty of helpful information, practical input for your own setting and situation. Before we get started, I forgot to mention a few kind of like housekeeping information. So we're running this webinar for around 90 minutes, so we're aiming to finish at 12 p.m. Hopefully you're able to see Emma, Sarah Jane and myself, as well as the presentation slides shared. We cannot hear or see you. That's the way it should be, but you can engage and submit questions or comments using the questions box through your GoToWebinar panel or browser window. As a kind of like test to see that this question box is working for you and that you know what it looks like, I'd love to ask you to just send us the country you're joining us from or the location, local authority. We've had quite the international crowd at the last of these webinars, so let's see where people are joining us from today. So if you could just open up your question box and just send us your location. And yes, they're flying in. I think Emma and SJ, if you can see that as well. So we've got people from all over Scotland, Edinburgh, Dundee, Falkirk, Perth, Glasgow. Anyone out there from outside Scotland? Ooh, Orkneys are here as well, Stirling, Aberdeenshire. Really, I think every local authority is here. Brilliant, thanks so much for joining us. Keep you posted on that. So we'll also be using a new kind of function of GoToWebinar, which we're excited about, but also a little bit nervous about. We're going to use the poll function, which we'll introduce later on. So Emma and SJ will introduce it to you. You'll be able to kind of like select responses from a range of kind of like true and false questions on your screen, and you'll see it in a few minutes. But if you have any issues with that, if you want to engage in any other way, please use the questions box to send us your comments. Especially if you have any IT issues, any problems of not being able to see the video, the audio drops out, anything like that. Please obviously check your internet connection and your device's settings, but also send us a message, and my colleague Megan and I will be there to help and give advice and support. Your questions or comments, you probably noticed that already, they won't be visible to everyone. Only our staff members can see them. We'll try to answer as many questions as possible throughout and at the end of the webinar, but there is quite a lot of you today, so we might not be able to get back to everyone, which is also why we're having an evaluation form, an online form that you can fill in at the end. That provides us with valuable feedback, but also gives you the opportunity to submit more questions if there's anything that is unclear and that you want Emma and SJ to get back on. So this Menti evaluation, you can see that on the current slide. All you have to do is open menti.com either on your smartphone or your web browser and enter that 6-digit number, and that will take you to the evaluation form. We'll show that number again and link later on, but please take a note of that just now so you have it ready to go and you can take 5 minutes at the end to fill it in. Right, we will be sharing the slides after this event, so there's no need to take screenshots and to write everything down. And we're actually recording this webinar as well, and it'll be available on our YouTube page probably in the next couple of days or next week. So yeah, no reason to write everything down and do that. We will be sharing this with you. Lastly, given the financial impact, really appreciate it if you would share our Give As You Live donation page. We'll send you a link to that later on as well. But any kind of support is appreciated. And yes, thanks so much for joining us today. That's all and enough from me. I'll pass over to Emma and SJ. I'll be kind of like joining in back and forth here and there. But yeah, hope you enjoy. I'll see you later.
Right, hi everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We are going to be talking to you about children's rights and additional support and why listening is more important than ever. So just to introduce myself, my name's Emma Rogan. I work at Children in Scotland. I'm Senior Policy Officer, and I spend half of my time leading on the Children's View Service as part of My Rights, My Say. I'll just pass over to SJ, or Sarah Jane to use her full name, who can introduce herself.
Thanks, Emma. Hi, good morning all. My name's Sarah Jane Cruz and I am the project coordinator for the My Rights, My Say service at Partners in Advocacy. I'm glad you could be with us this morning.
Fab. So SJ is just going to take us through the plan for today.
Yeah, just a whistle-stop tour of the plan. So what we're going to cover within the webinar this morning, we have a short true or false quiz surrounding children's rights to get you going this morning. And then we're going to cover the children's rights themselves, the My Rights, My Say service, and the support we can offer. We're going to discuss the impact of the current situation, and we have some scenarios for you to explore before finishing with questions and evaluation. As Svenja said, with the webinar today, we're hoping to do the evaluation through Mentimeter, and we would really value your feedback. We've included the Mentimeter address and the code there at the bottom, just in case you can't stay with us for the whole webinar. We would still really appreciate your thoughts and feedbacks, and you can access Mentimeter, as Svenja said, in your browser or on your phone, and the code there is 995933 for this webinar. So thank you so much for joining us today.
So what we're going to do, this is where we're going to give a go at our the poll function that we haven't used before. So fingers crossed that this works. So we're going to ask you a series of questions that will be either true or false. So let's have a look and see if this works. So hopefully it should come up on your screen now. So the question is, children aged 12 to 15 with additional support needs in Scotland have the right to request a CSP, it's a coordinated support plan. So if you click, you should be able to click whether you believe that's true or false on your screen. I'll just give a second for some people to get their votes in, and then we'll be able to see how people have voted. So this is the thing we haven't used before. Right, we've got, most people have got their votes in now. Just going to give you a few more seconds. Don't worry, we won't know who said what, so if you want to just have a guess, have a guess. Okie doke. And I'm going to close that, and we should be able to, this is the bit that and we should be able to share the poll results. So hopefully everybody can now see. So we had 91% of people say true and 9% of people say false. So the answer, the 91% have it. It is true. So if children who are aged 12 to 15 with additional support needs in Scotland do have the right to request a coordinated support plan. So that is true. So we're going to move on now to the next question, which Sarah Jane is going to just talk you through.
Yes, so the second question is, an adult can decide that a child will have an advocate. So an adult can decide that a child will have an advocate. Do you think that's true or false? And I'll just give you a minute or two to get your votes in.
I can see the numbers coming in, and this one's dividing opinion a little bit more than the last.
It is a little bit of a trick question.
I know we're starting off, we're going straight in and testing your knowledge before we've told you any information, which is maybe a bit cruel for first thing on a Thursday morning, but
It might be.
okay, shall we?
Yeah, let's go to the results
and see what the answers are. Oh, I feel like look at that.
Well,
Almost
yeah,
half and half.
yeah, with 51% the false have it. It is actually false. An adult can refer a child for to have an advocate, but they can't decide that they will and make them have it. It's got to be the child or young person's decision.
And we'll be talking about that a little bit more later on.
Yeah.
So question 3. So there we go. Children of any age have a right to be involved in decisions about their education. Children of any age have a right to be involved in decisions about their education. I feel like we're getting the answers are coming in faster now. Okay, that's the majority of people have voted. I'll just give a couple more seconds. Couple people be getting your votes in. 2 seconds. And we'll see what the answers have come in at. So we've come in 87% people think true, 13 say false. It is in fact true. So children of any age have a right under the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, Article 12, to be involved in decisions about anything that impacts on their life. So yes, so children of any age would have a right to be involved in decisions about their education. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that might look like later on. So let's go to question 4.
Yep, back over to myself. So if a child exercises their own rights, their parent or carer is automatically no longer involved in planning and decisions. Is that true or is it false? So if a child exercises their own rights, their parent or carer is automatically no longer involved in the planning and decisions.
Right, and that's most people have had their vote. So give you 2 more seconds, get your vote in, and we'll close that just now. And here are the answers, or what you submitted.
95%. Wow, yep, absolutely, it is false. Parents and carers are still entitled to be involved in the planning decision if a young person is exercising their rights for themselves. So they're still involved, and again, we will talk about this later.
Okay then, so question 5. Children aged 12 to 15 now have all the same rights as their parents. So this is children aged 12 to 15 with additional support needs now have all the same rights as their parents. Okay, going to give you a few more seconds to vote. And we'll close that one now. So as you can see, this one kind of split opinions a little bit more, but it is in fact false. But again, a little bit one of our tricky questions again. So children aged 12 to 15 have a lot of the same rights as their parents. Their rights were extended to include a lot of the same things, but there are still things that they are not able to do that a parent would have to do. And again, we will talk through all of those things later on in the presentation. So question 6, we've got a total of 8 questions. Question 6.
Yeah, so children aged 12 to 15 have the right to ask for an assessment of their needs. Children aged 12 to 15 have the right to ask for an assessment of their needs.
This is an interesting one. I feel like this is, people have come in, the most people have voted on this one, and quite unanimously. So I'm going to close that just now and show 100% of people are true. Are they right, Esther?
Perfect. Yep, absolutely. 100%. It is absolutely true. Children aged 12 to 15 have the right to ask for an assessment of their needs. Brilliant.
So we're going to go to question 7 now. So question 7, children in England have the same rights as children in Scotland to be involved in decisions about their education. Children in England have the same rights as children in Scotland to be involved in decisions about their education. Now, this is not me trying to stir up any kind of like cross-border or any kind of we're not trying to get into any of that, but just a technical question. Okay, I'm going to close that and we'll see how the votes have come in. So we've had 40% said true, 60% said false. So the answer is actually false. And as we're going to talk you through today, the legislation that we're going to talk you through is specific to children in Scotland. So there are some rights that all children share, but there are some rights that are very specific to children in Scotland. And finally, we have our last question, which you're going to have to listen carefully for because we couldn't fit all the question in the poll. So, Esther, on you go.
Yes, indeed. I'm probably going to read this one through a couple of times, but quite slowly. So, the My Rights, My Say service offers the following services for free across Scotland: advocacy, legal representation for children, independent support to ensure children's views are heard during decision-making processes, partnership with schools and organisations to develop their practice to make sure children can use their rights, advice and information for children, professionals, parents and carers about children's rights and additional support legislation. Is that true or is it false? Does the My Rights, My Say service offer all of the following? I think I'll read through that list just one more time because it was a lot. I tend to get stuck with the long-winded questions. I'm sure it's just my luck. So My Rights, My Say offers the following services for free across Scotland: advocacy, legal representation for children, independent support to ensure children's views are heard during decision-making processes, partnership work with schools and organisations to develop their practice to make sure children can use their rights, advice and information for children, professionals, parents and carers about children's rights and additional support legislation. Is that true or is it false?
So I'm going to give you a couple seconds to answer. We've had most people have put their votes in, and I'm going to close that now. So what do people think? So I wonder if, so 80% of you think true, 2% think false. SJ, is it true or is it false?
It's true. It's true. My Rights service does offer all of the above. So yeah, brilliant. Well done, guys.
I wonder if the people who said false think that we're just trying to trick you. You maybe got a reputation already of trick questions.
Perhaps.
So we wanted to start with a quiz. Just it wasn't a test of your knowledge, but just trying to get you into it. And also, we didn't want to put it at the end, and you feel like we were going to test you on what we've been telling you today, but just to kind of get the conversation going. So we're going to just talk you through those kind of topics in a bit more detail. So as we highlighted in the quiz, so all children have the right to have their views listened to and to be involved in decisions about their support, and that comes under the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. So Article 12 states that all children under the age of 18 have the right to be listened to and taken seriously about matters that impact on their lives. Education would very much come under that. And it's an exciting time in Scotland as we're working towards incorporation of the UNCRC into Scots law. So we're going to be hearing a lot more talk about children's rights, hopefully, as we progress with that. Pupils aged 16 plus have the same rights as their parents when it comes to making decisions about their education if they have capacity, so that little caveat there, and they have done for some time. Another specific right that children have when it comes to their education is in most cases they have a right to appeal against being excluded from school. We're not going to go into that in detail today, but just to highlight to you that that is a right that, that children have. And also children have the right to make a disability discrimination reference to the Additional Support Needs Tribunal. And you can find details about that on the Tribunal Needs to Learn website, if that is something you want some more information about. But the focus of our presentation for you today is going to be on the rights that were extended to children aged 12 to 15 with additional support needs in the Education, to give it its full title, in the Education, Additional Support for Learning Scotland Act 2004. That's going to be the focus of our discussion, and that's the focus of the My Rights, My Say service itself. So, just struggling to move my slides on. SJ is just going to talk you through the specific rights that children with additional support needs aged 12 to 15 have.
Yeah, so as set out by the Education Additional Support for Learning Act, the following are rights that children with additional support needs aged 12 to 15 have. And if we go left to right and top to bottom, starting with, they have the right to ask the local authority if they have, to find out if they have additional support needs. Or to request a specific assessment. So, for example, if a young person was struggling with them working their English and thought maybe there was something there, they could request a dyslexia assessment. They have the right to find out if they need and to request a coordinated support plan. And if they have a coordinated support plan, they have the right to ask for that to be reviewed. If it's out of date or it no longer meets their educational needs, they can ask for that coordinated support plan to be reviewed. They have rights about their information, so they have rights to get information or for their information to be shared. So rights about their additional support needs, they have the right to receive a copy of their coordinated support plan and to be told about decisions about their rights. They also have the right to be asked if they want their information to be shared. So, for example, if they leave school and they would like their additional support needs shared with a college to make that transition easier for them, or if they would prefer that that information be kept confidential. Going down to the bottom, they have the rights to, they have the right to support them to have their views heard. So to be involved in the decisions about their support and their education. And they have access to support and advocacy to have their views heard, hence My Rights, My Say. This could be, for example, sharing what might work for them in a school meeting via their advocate and being listened to and what that means for them. So children with additional support needs between 12 and 15 also have the right to be involved in resolving disagreements. So to ask for independent adjudication, to make reference to the Additional Support Needs Tribunal, and to have their views asked for during mediation. As we sort of mentioned before, there are things that aren't included within the children's rights, such as mediation, placing requests, and they don't cover young people without an additional support needs. I guess the thing to know about My Rights, My Say and this sort of legislation is that additional support needs don't just cover the sort of traditional additional support needs. It could be anything from a young person who is a highly able pupil or someone who is a young carer or looked after. So if they're having a difficulty within school, it's more than likely that they've probably got an additional support need there. Going back to the things that aren't included, things like mediation and placing requests stays a parental right. And as we said before, parental rights aren't taken away by the fact that children have these additional rights. This enables young people to have their own say in their education and in their plans if they choose to, or if, for example, a parent or carer was unable to exercise those rights for the young person. This just sort of widens it up so that the children and young people can have their own view and their own say.
Fantastic. I just wonder if there's anything that anybody would like clarified about those rights before we move on.
It's quite a lot of information to get in the one to getting the one bit.
Hi Emma,
So
yeah, just popping back in to help with some of the questions. So someone's asking, does additional support needs include children with English as a second language?
Absolutely,
yeah,
it does.
It would, yeah. So we have a really broad definition of additional support needs in Scotland, which really encompasses anything that impacts anything that means that a child would need additional support in order to kind of reach their potential in line with a child of an equivalent age and stage. So if there's something that is preventing them from doing that, so English being a second language could create that situation. Are there any other questions coming through?
Yeah, there's a few more. Someone's asking, why do a lot of places stop supporting young people after the age of 15?
So the reason that this legislation goes up to 15 is to just bring it up to, so children aged 16 and above already had these rights. They had already been written into legislation at a previous in previous legislation, so it was just, so that's why this particular piece of legislation comes in line up to 15, but I can't really speak for services more widely than that.
Does ASN include mental health needs, for example, depression and anxiety?
Yeah, absolutely. It would. We work with a lot of young people who find school a challenge and difficult, and part of that can be mental health, so it would absolutely include mental health difficulties as an additional support need.
How will this be impacted by implementing blending learning?
So that's something we're going to go on to talk about in a couple of slides' time, is just what the situation at the moment means and what we can focus on, and the things that we know and the things we don't know. So hopefully, if you hold on to that, hopefully we will answer that later on.
Brilliant. Yeah, I'll keep track of the questions. I'll take a note of them. Someone asked, where can I see the questions? The questions are not visible to everyone, just us staff members. So that's why we take a note and go through them and ask them. And don't worry, if we can't answer your question today, I will pass them on to Emma and SJ, and they'll try to pull some resources together afterwards for you, and we'll send out a link where you can find more information. But thanks everyone for that through.
Yeah, hopefully if we didn't get to your questions to get them answered just now, we might cover them as we move on, but we will, if we have time, we will kind of stop and we will have time for questions towards the end. So the thinking behind the legislation for 12 to 15-year-olds was really to make sure that they're more involved in decisions about their support and ensure that children are able to share their views with a view to children who maybe don't have an effective parental advocate who can do that on their behalf. We know that a lot of children, their parents work alongside them and make sure and advocate with them and for them to make sure they get the support they need to learn at school, but we know that not all children have that, and so that's just the thinking behind this legislation, was that it would give children more power to ask for things in their own right. They wouldn't be relying on a parent or adult to do that for them. And what we've seen in the time that we have been working with children and helping them to use these rights is the impact that that has had. So there's some quotes on your screen just now from a parent who worked with the Children's View Service, who said it was really empowering for her daughter to know that her voice was being heard and taken seriously. A pupil who worked with the Advocacy Service said that advocacy really helped me when I was struggling a lot with things at home and school. It helped ease my stress, having someone to talk to when I was worried. And another pupil just reflecting on the fact that the teachers were listening and it's much better, and they feel that they can speak in meetings. So really, the legislation and the support that that's put in place alongside it is really trying to create a space where children are empowered to be more involved and actively involved, and even the driving force behind decisions that are made about their education. So We know that there are some issues around the fact that it is only 12, and as I highlighted earlier, younger than 12, children still have the right to be involved in decisions, just under the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. It just means that that's not covered in this particular legislation, and it also means that the My Rights My Say service, which was set up to support this legislation, wouldn't necessarily, cover support for those pupils. So we are aware that that's something to think about for younger ages, but generally we would advocate for all children being involved in decisions about their education. But we're going to move on now to hopefully answer that question about where we are up to. So SJ, do you want to just start us off?
Yeah, of course. So it has been 4 months since the majority of children stopped physically attending school. And this can cause a lot of anxiety in some young people in this unprecedented situation. For young people, it has been a major adjustment in their lives and to their education. It's the summer holidays in Scotland now, but it will soon be time for a new term, and speaking to young people, the thoughts of returning to education are already very real for them. So yeah. So
in Scotland, we have we've had some education continuity directions, and I don't know about the rest of you, but we found it, quite hard work keeping up with, the changing guidance and legislation. But we are very lucky to have support in our team of a legal expert who keeps us all up to date. So to just talk you through where we're up to with the education continuity directions. Particularly with regards to additional support needs. What the Education Continuity Direction has done, as it has said that failures to comply with certain duties can be disregarded, and that's the Section 4 duty to provide additional support for learning, and some of the time limits that are set out in additional support for learning legislation. However, what that means is, it doesn't mean that local authorities and schools can stop providing additional support for learning. It's only disregarded insofar as the failure is due to the current restrictions. So that's quite specific. That it could only be if there was something that there was a support that was being provided that was only able to be provided face to face, and that wasn't possible because of the current conditions, and that hadn't been provided, but not just that everything had stopped. And there is very much still a duty to seek and take into account the views of the child. So that's not changed either. So while there have been some changes, it hasn't changed everything. And we are expecting another education continuity direction to come out. I believe today was the day that it was due to be reviewed. They're being reviewed every 3 weeks. And we should see some further changes as we move into the next academic year as well. So SJ is just going to reflect on what we think the next academic year might look like.
Yeah, absolutely. So no one can say for sure at this point. The direction that has been given from government at the moment is that each education authority has to resume attendance at school at the earliest but safest time to do so. So it's sort of given that power to each education authority to decide when that is, but as well as being the earliest, it's also stating the safest. So although they want young people back in school as early as possible, it has to be safe to do so. So the Scottish Government's hope is for a full-time return to school for most children, but there may be aspects of a blended approach that work better for some young people.
So thinking about that and thinking about there's still quite a lot of uncertainty about what the next academic year might look like, what are the things that we can know for certain? And one of the things that we feel that we can know for certain is that it's really important to go forward with a rights-based approach. And what that means is focusing as much as possible on the individual children and their rights and their needs so that they don't get lost amongst all of the changes and the potential chaos that we might be feeling about the return to school. So if that's thinking about whether they are your own children, you're here as a parent and carer, or whether they are children that you work with and support as a member of education staff or another kind of support worker, or whether you're here in kind of both capacities. It's thinking about how can we go forward and maintain that child-centred, rights-based approach. And it's also important to think about the fact that the rights that we've outlined, as we mentioned, they apply to children with additional support needs, and there will be the children with additional support needs that we were aware of when we were, children were physically attending school prior to March, but there will also be children who are coming back to school with new additional support needs, either, alongside support needs that had already been identified, or children who didn't have identified additional support needs may now have that. So we're going to see quite a change in, the numbers of children. We were talking about this amongst our team, and I was saying, well, it feels like all children are going to have an additional support need to some degree because they've all been through something that's quite extraordinary over the last few months. But actually, it was pointed out that because it's a comparative test about additional support needs, all children are going to require different support to last year, but the threshold for additional support needs, because it's in comparison to other children of the same age and stage, actually, if that's gone up for all children, then it's not going to be a universal case of additional support needs. So I found that quite interesting. We also need to think about the children who won't be able to return to school for whatever reason. So if there is a full return to school or even a blended model, there may be some children that are unable to return to a physical school environment, and that they are not forgotten about, that their rights are still thought about and as important as the children who are there and turning up and physically able to participate in their education within a school setting. So we thought what we would do just now is take an opportunity to reflect on some of the learnings. It's easy to get caught up in the difficulties of this situation, but there are things that we can take forward with us into the next academic year that have been key pieces of learning. So SJ is just going to talk through some of the key pieces of learning from some of the advocacy partners that she has been working with.
Yeah, absolutely. So from speaking with young people, there's a lot of learning to be taken for the last 4 months. For example, young people that have been out of school physically are accessing online education with their peers for the first time. One young person, a my Say Advocate, is working with has been successfully supported to talk to their school and negotiated that they actually won't return physically until October, and even then there will be discussions surrounding that. And this has alleviated this young person's anxiety around physically attending school and allowed them to do their schoolwork from home and allowed them to continue to thrive educationally, but to do it in a way that's right for them. And I think, as Emma said earlier, it comes down to individual children and what works for them. We are transitioning back to what the Scottish Government again hope will be a full-time return to school, but what that looks like for young people having come through this sort of unprecedented time will be different for young people. And that's what we aim to do, is to support young people as much as we can. But yeah, it will be different for every young person, and I think there's a lot of learning from this to be done, that actually education can be done from sort of a long distance perspective, and for the supports that schools can provide, and what suits one young person might not necessarily suit another.
So we would be really interested just now, we've got a little bit of time in our plan, is if you could have a think and reflect about what is a key piece of learning that you will be taking forward with you into the next academic year from the last sort of 4 months or so. If you could just pop those in the question tab, we'll read some of them out, or you might just want to make a note for yourself personally. You don't feel that you have to share that, but just thinking about what's a key piece of learning that you're going to be taking with you into the next academic year.
Hi Emma, yeah, I'm back to read out some of those comments. Some of us
Thanks,
already. someone was already sharing a bit of work they've done in their school, which is Additional Support Needs School, which was open for most of lockdown, a whole of lockdown. So they've done a lot of work online and using YouTube as a story channel and as a way to engage with the pupils over that period. So yeah, thanks so much for sharing that.
I can see some things through.
Yes, absolutely. Someone's saying schools can adopt more flexible approaches. So there's a lot of flexibility, I guess, learned there. To value the importance of face-to-face interactions in schools. Just how much school time is taken up with admin, moving around between classes, chatting and mingling, as actual hardcore learning. Absolutely. Training and support for families and professionals can be provided online, and they'll continue to do this as a specialist services into the future. So
Fantastic.
mental health difficulties, parents and carers, for sure. Someone's asking, what about parents? You know, have they been engaged? Children will need extra support, and additional support needs may increase. Yeah, a lot of people now are saying, you know, more flexibility in doing or trying new things and new systems. And that actually a lot of children have thrived through engaging and learning from home.
Yeah. And it's definitely, you know, it's changed our practice, hasn't it, SJ? But thinking about going forward, that things that would have been, you know, we wouldn't have automatically offered. We were very face-to-face, you know, physically face-to-face service, but you know, we're definitely going to incorporate a lot more as an offer, the kind of digital engagement, because we've seen that that works for some of the young people, children and young people that we work with. And especially being a national service, it just means that our reach can be wider as well.
Absolutely, Emma. Yeah.
Thank you for people. We will go back and sort of read through what people have shared, but I think it is really important. You know, it's easy to get caught up in the fact that, my goodness, this is so different from what we're used to. And there's been a lot of discussion, haven't there, been about like returning to normal and what that might look like, and do we want to go back to normal? Was the normal we had before working for everybody? So I guess, you know, it's been a relentless 4 months, but it's about taking that opportunity to reflect and think about, well, what are the things that we can do differently and hopefully make things a bit more inclusive. I also want to caveat by saying this is not saying that we expect, you know, teachers to start doing 100 additional things on top of the hundreds and hundreds of things that they already did. And I don't want this to be perceived as like pressure from us that you need to completely change how you're doing things. It needs to be a collective approach. And even if you're just taking one piece of learning with you into the new academic year, about how you can maybe make, you know, hold on to something that you feel has made things more inclusive, that's really important. So it's not about taking individual responsibility for changing absolutely everything. So who are My Rights My Say? So My Rights My Say are, we're a collection of organisations under this kind of umbrella, and we do a range of different things. So we have Inquire, who I'm sure many of you are aware of. They're a fantastic service. So they are the Additional Support for Learning Advice and Information Service for Scotland, and they provide advice and information about all things to do with additional support for learning, and the rights of children aged 12 to 15 now comes under that, and they are form part of our My Rights My Say team. We have the Partners in Advocacy, which SJ is part of, and they provide the advocacy service for children. Children Scotland, which is where I am from, so we provide independent support to make sure children's views are heard in formal processes such as assessments, which might sound deceptively like advocacy, but it is different, and we will talk you through exactly how it's different in just a second. The Children's Views Service that Children in Scotland provides for My Rights My Say also provides support for practitioners, so going out and doing you know, sessions in schools, sessions at local authorities, and just giving some space to reflect on practice, and maybe if there are tweaks that need to be made, or an opportunity to reflect on how the rights of children can be reflected and embedded as fully as possible. And then we also have Cairn Legal, who provide, so that's Ian Nisbet, provides legal representation to support children who make a reference to the Additional Support Needs Tribunal. So if a child had decided that they were going to use their own rights to go to the tribunal, then they can have free legal representation to do that. So altogether, we form the My Rights, My Say team, who are here to support children aged 12 to 15 to ensure that they are able to use their rights, understand their rights, and sort of make full use of them. So, as I said, sometimes it can feel like the advocacy and children's views side of things are very similar. And you'll see if you go on our contact page on our website, if you wanted to contact, we say like you can't ask for both of them at the same time. And the key difference is the motivating factor behind them. So for advocacy, it is driven by the child. It is that child saying that they wish to use their rights. It is them saying, I would like to be involved in this decision, or I would like this decision to be made. And it's very much coming from them. And an advocacy worker can work with a child to explain their rights to support at school. They can listen to them and help them work out what they might want to say. They can support them to request an assessment of their needs, or to request a coordinated support plan. They can attend school meetings with them. They can support them to feel confident to speak up in meetings, empower them to speak for themselves, to help them understand why decisions have been made if they're different to what they wanted, and explain other options to them. Now, you might feel like, oh, the Children's Views column, that's quite similar. So where the Children's Views Service comes in is when there is a process that is happening that is being led by adults. And as part of that, the adults are saying that they would like to know what the child thinks, so that that can inform their decision making. So that's not a process that is being driven forward by the child. That's a process that's been driven forward by adults, but the adults are still clear that they want to ensure that that child's views are heard as part of that process. So within that, the Children's Views Service can explain the decision-making process that's happening. So that might be that, that the adults have decided that a CSP is being put in place, or another kind of plan, or thinking about transitions, and they want to know what that child thinks, so they're part of that. We'll then listen to them and help them work out what they want to say in response. There might be set questions or issues that are put to them, whereas with advocacy, it would be the child saying, these are the things that are important to me and I think that they need to be spoken about. The Children's Views Service would then provide a report on what that child had said, which the child gets to check through before it goes back to the adults that requested it. We can attend meetings with them and empower them to speak for themselves, as the advocate would do. And we also, as I mentioned, can support practitioners to develop their skills to involve children in decision making, because children can be involved in decision making. It doesn't require the My Rights, My Say to be involved for that to happen, but we're here to support that if sometimes it's beneficial to have somebody who is independent from family and school to give a child that space to really think about what it is that they want to say as part of that process. So it really is the driving force behind things. It's also worth noting that there is a test of a capacity and well-being test within the legislation around 12 to 15-year-olds that says that children can use their rights if they have capacity to do so, and it wouldn't negatively impact on their well-being. We haven't found this to get in the way, particularly of children asking to use their rights and accessing advocacy. But there have been some children where we know that they wouldn't have the capacity to take processes forward on their own, but they still have the right to be involved in those decisions. And that's where the Children's Views Service can support as well. So it's where, for whatever reason, that process is being led by adults, there isn't a capacity or a capacity test for the Children's Views Service to be involved. Obviously, we wouldn't push, it's all voluntary, so the well-being test kind of applies in so much as if a child says no or it's distressing for them, we wouldn't push for that to be You know, it doesn't have to happen, but it's an offer, because it's always the opportunity to have their views involved, to have their views heard, but it's not a demand on that child. So the child can always say, no, I don't want to participate at this time. It's about making sure that they know that door is open. So that's really the difference between advocacy and children's views, is the driving force behind the decision-making process. So we're going to give you some scenarios just now to think through and have a think about whether you think that might be a situation where advocacy would be the best service to support that child, or the children's views service. So thinking about that driving force, that's the key question. So, oh, sorry, I've skipped ahead. We are going to go to the scenarios, but first, SJ is going to talk about our current offer.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. Yeah, we're just going to discuss the current offer, and as much as it is a really unprecedented time, but there are still ways to support young people in education. We can continue to help children exercise their rights and be involved in their education decisions. We continue to work with our existing young people and are still accepting new referrals. We provide the same support to the best of our ability and strive to provide all of the same services. Although it's not face-to-face at the moment, we use a range of medias, whatever the young people are comfortable with. So we are continuing to foster relationships with children in ways that are comfortable for them. So one of the things that we've been doing, if we've not been able to meet a new young person we're working with face to face, is send a video to the young person so that they can see what their advocacy worker looks like and what we sound like. We cater to young people who prefer email or text only conversations and who find face-to-face support intimidating. And that's a piece of learning that we're taking from the current situation, is that actually some young people who want to exercise their rights, they want to do that, they want to have their views heard, but it could be sort of incumbent on their day. And they would rather actually have a 5-minute phone call than someone turn up at their house and stay for half an hour making polite chit chat. Some young people just want to kind of get their views shared with their advocacy worker or children's views worker, and sort of have that with that. At the moment, because we're not able to meet face to face, we're using mixed methods to make sure that the children using the service are free to talk. So for example, if I know a young person really well and they're a lot quieter than usual, it might mean that I'm maybe thinking they're not as free to talk as they would like to be. So maybe there's something going on in the house, or they've not got privacy. And so therefore, what I would do is maybe wait a day or so, send them a text, see if they're free for another call, and just make sure that their views and what they're telling me is their own thoughts. We are still attending meetings, be it virtually, and we can still attend those meetings at school to share the young people's views and express their wishes as we normally would. Recently, My Rights, My Say supported a young person to share their views about school for the first time, which had a massive impact, as it was from there that things were able to develop on, and the young person was granted a coordinated support plan. So we are still engaging with our young people, we are still offering the service as best we can, and we're finding new and improved ways to do that for the young people in ways that they find comfortable and are happy with. So the service is still here, and we're carrying on through the pandemic.
We are indeed. So now, after I jump the gun, we are now going to move to look at some scenarios. So we're going to start thinking about Alex. So Alex is 13 years old and has diabetes and mental health issues. He's been finding it increasingly difficult to make it into school and worries about missing his different appointments. Alex has input from the educational psychologist, his own psychologist, the CAMS mental health team, and his diabetic team, and it can all be quite overwhelming for him. Alex would like to know how often he sees the different professionals as his anxiety lessens when there's a plan in place. So just using the question sort of chat function again, do you think that this is a case where advocacy would be the best support for Alex, or do you think children's views would be the best support for Alex? So Svenja is going to keep an eye as things fly in. We weren't able to use the poll for this one, scenarios are a bit long. So Svenja, you were just okay to give us a rough estimation?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the moment, the majority are saying advocacy. There's a few in children's views and needing a CSP, but yeah, definitely advocacy current lead.
Advocacy is in the current lead. So yes, it would be advocacy, and the reason we know that it would be advocacy is because Alex wants to know how often. So it's coming from Alex as the driving force, and quite rightly somebody has identified that it would be looking into getting a CSP because there are so many professionals involved in ensuring that Alex can make the most out of his education. So fantastic. So we will for each one, we will ask you if you think it's advocacy or children's views, and if we can also sort of see what people think is the kind of key issue in the scenario as well. So thanks to the person who identified that Alex maybe is in need of a CSP. So SJ is going to tell us about Mark.
Yeah, Mark is 15 years old and is worried about going back to school after COVID-19. Mark is worried about the work he has missed, and he finds it really difficult to do schoolwork at home as he has 2 younger siblings. Mark would like to talk to his teachers about how he can catch up, if he'll be able to pass his exams this year, but feels unable to contact them directly and share how he feels. So again, it's the same, it's deciding, do you think Mark would benefit more from advocacy involvement or children's views involvement?
Yeah, at the moment the response is all advocacy. It's one person, not two now, saying children's views, but again, advocacy here, the strong lead. Advocacy initiated by Mark. What's
Yeah, absolutely. It would be advocacy initiated by Mark. Anyone, any ideas on the theme surrounding? Anything coming in, Svenja?
Someone saying this is more anxiety based and maybe necessarily advocacy, but parents can help too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Communication breakdown, definitely more support required there.
Yeah, and it's about communication, and if advocacy was involved, it would be to support Mark to share his views with school, and perhaps that would lessen his anxiety, but anxiety might well be the additional support need there for Mark. Yeah, perfect.
Someone's asking as well what support can be provided by the school to help with his fears and create a plan with Mark.
I guess that would be very individual to Mark in the school to see what Mark feels is that might help. So for something along these lines, if Mark and his advocate was to share with a teacher, these are Mark's fears, that might be about looking at where's Mark at with his work. Is there the ability to catch up? Is there extra work? Is there homework clubs? Is there things that the teachers can put in place that makes things easier? It's as broad as it's long, and it's individual to the young person and what the school are able to provide. There's no set answer, but it would be working out a plan that would work for Mark. And again, with additional support needs and things that can help, that might help for a time, but then that might need to change.
Yeah, so it goes back to the point about just maintaining that individual child-focused, rights-based approach, isn't it? Let me go back. Okay, should we have a look at Casper? So Casper's just turned 12 years old and he has autism. He has really enjoyed being part of his small rural primary school and he has lots of friends there. Mrs. Jones is the head of the ASL base at the high school Casper will be attending next year. She's had some phone calls with Casper's parents and knows they're worried about how big a change this will be for Casper. So what were you thinking? Is this going to be, do you think Casper could maybe benefit from advocacy or the Children's View Service? Just noting the comment earlier about parents, absolutely. You know, there doesn't have to be involvement from a professional service, but the offer is there, and that's what we're exploring in this exercise. And it may be that parents and schools can manage without additional input. but we're just talking you through the ways in which we can be here if you need us. So Svenja, what are people thinking?
Yeah, I think just to follow up as well, someone saying that, you know, Mark's scenario seems like a very typical of how young people will be feeling and returning to school. Definitely worth pointing out. A lot of comments are saying children's views. Someone transition team visits, youth service, but definitely children's views. A few people saying advocacy as well, but children's views in the first place. And someone's explaining here, children's views, this is a scheduled transition. Yeah, and someone else pointed out sometimes introducing too many people at this time can add extra stress. So yeah, definitely children's views.
Yeah, so we would say it is a children's abusive case because the driving force behind it is the adults involved. So Mrs. Jones has identified that there's some anxiety, the Casper's parents are worried, so they're wanting to think about, well, what can we do? And they want to know what Casper thinks about that transition and feeding his views in. Absolutely, the point about having lots of people involved, for some families, for some children, they have lots of people who come in and out of their lives, and we don't want to add additional stress in those circumstances. So it may be that if there are, you know, if there's support workers already working with a child and it's not, they don't want somebody new in, it could be just that we provide a bit of support to that, you know, step one removed support to talk them through what the kind of work that we would do if that's not their area. They feel like that particular worker feels like that's not their area of expertise. So we'd always be aware of that kind of that child's situation, and we wouldn't want to overwhelm them. Another example of that would be that a child could have an advocate who's been supporting them in conversations with their school. That child's parent may then have made a request for, made a placing request, the additional support for learning tribunal. Obviously, we know that children can't make placing requests. As part of a placing request, the tribunal would always request the child's views and would come to the children's views part of my rights, my say for that, because you know, it is an adult-led process. But if there's an advocate already involved, it wouldn't make sense for another worker from My Rights, My Say, just from a slightly different team, to get involved. So the advocate would continue to support them through that process. So we are aware of how of, you know, not wanting to overload people with too many people through the door. So Esther, can you tell us about Sam?
Yeah, Sam is 12 years old and loves going to school. She has an active social life and attends many of the after-school sports clubs. Sam has always found English and languages difficult, but since transitioning to high school, it has been more difficult for her as she doesn't have the support of her primary school teachers who helped her with her spelling and reading. Sam thinks she's been left behind with her learning and thinks something might be wrong.
So do you think that's, do you think Sam would benefit from an advocate or support from the Children's View Service? Sven, over to you.
So yeah, majority saying advocacy. One or two here saying children's views. But yes, someone saying advocacy for an assessment of needs or advocacy initiated by Sam, and a chat with guidance teachers here as well. But yeah, a view to an assessment, requesting an assessment. So yeah, a lot of the similar opinions here.
Absolutely, and that's exactly what it would be within this scenario. Sam is the person that thinks there's something wrong, so an assessment of needs would absolutely be the sort of right thing for Sam if she wanted to do that, and it would be advocacy, yeah.
Fantastic. So now we've got Amy. So Amy's 15 years old. She has autism and anxiety. She hasn't been going to school regularly for a while now. Amy's mum made a placing request for Amy to go to a special school, but the Additional Support Needs Tribunal feel that Amy can get the support she needs to learn at her local high school. Mr. Stewart is Amy's new educational psychologist and is the lead on putting a plan together for Amy's education. So do we feel that that is a children's views or an advocacy case?
Right, first responses are children's views. A few people coming in with advocacy, but yeah, majority saying children's views. Anyone have some additional thoughts there? Someone saying children's views, assessment and CSP. Someone saying a bit of both. And can children's views appeal a placing request?
Yeah. So this would be a children's views, again, because it's Mr. Stewart, he's putting the plan together and he wants to know what Amy thinks. The Children's Views Service may also have supported Amy through that placing request process, the Additional Support Needs Tribunal that her mum made. So there have been quite a number of cases that children that I've worked with where we've become involved, where the placing request has gone to the tribunal and we've done a piece of work, and then there has been either a transition to a new school and a plan put in place for that, or it was the school that they were already attending was decided was the most appropriate place, and looking at how to resolve some of the difficulties that there were with that school. So there have been cases where the Children's Views Service has then been involved for another specific process. But yeah, it's been driven forward by the adults in Amy's life at that point.
Someone's asking, will the children's placement be funded if the mother disagrees with Mr. Stewart?
So it would be the decision of the Additional Support Needs Tribunal that is kind of final. So they could, so if Amy's mum has made a request for Amy to go to a special school, but the tribunal has said that they feel, considering all of the evidence, that Amy should be able to get the support she needs to learn at her local high school, then it will be her local high school that she goes to. Mum can appeal the tribunal's decision. She has the right to do that, but in the circumstance that the tribunal had decided that it was the special school, and if that was an independent special school and there were fees attached to that, then it would be for the local authority to pay for that. I mean, mum could, if she had the means, I guess, could make a direct application and pay. And I'm aware of some families who have been able to do that. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, I think so. And someone's also pointing out that funding is only relevant when it is an independent special school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, we've got our last scenario here. SJ, can you tell us about Benji?
Yeah, Benji is 14 years old. He has a learning disability and has recently been diagnosed with leukemia, which means some of his learning will now have to take place in hospital. Due to the number of professionals involved in making sure Benji has the support he needs to learn, his parents have requested a coordinated support plan is put in place. So what are we thinking for Benji, advocacy or children's views?
Oh, it's mixed. First two responses for advocacy. Now there's a lot of children's views, so it seems a bit like a 50-50 mixed bag here. Yeah. Someone says children's views as it is it's the parent's request for a CSP. Yeah, more children's views coming in now, but yeah, not a clear decision here.
And it would be children's views, because again, it's the parents that are requesting the coordinated support plan. Children's views could go in and work with Benji to get his views, but again, going back to the point we made before, Benji has a learning disability, so there might be capacity issues that we're like unaware of at the start of it, so it would be a children's views case.
Someone pointed that out exactly. The capacity will be here potentially.
Spot on.
So just to make you aware that if you are either a professional or parent or carer and you do want the Children's Views Service to work with you, that's always a joint decision. So we would always want full buy-in from both sides, that that listening to the child as part of that process is something that people are committed to, because we don't want to put children in a position where they feel like they're being asked for their views and they're not listened to, because that can be quite damaging to trust. So there's resources on the My Rights My Say website. If you are a parent and you would like the local authority to support a referral to My Rights My Say, there's a letter that you can, a template letter you can use for that. And if you are from a local authority and you would like a parent to agree to a referral to My Rights My Say, there's an information sheet that you can also download from the My Rights My Say website. So it's always voluntary, but yeah, we would want that whole team that was making the decision to be committed to making sure that Benji has the opportunity to sharing his views to make the best support plan possible, I suppose. So that takes us to the end of our presentation. We've got some time now for questions and reflections, but we would also remind you to grab your phone and get on the on Menti and fill in your evaluations. That's a reminder just now. But we do have some time to take some questions through the question, or if you have any points of reflections, key things that you're going to take away from today, we would love to hear those.
Yeah, thanks so much to both of you, Emma and SJ. That was a lot of information, I'm sure. I love how engaged the group was, and thanks so much for all your questions and comments. There certainly are quite a few questions to go through, and we've got a bit of time left for that. So I'm going to go through some of them. They're probably not in a particular order, and you might have touched upon some of them already throughout. But I'll just read them out so we know for sure that people have their questions answered. So one of the questions about My Rights My Say here is, do you work with children up to 18, and also do children under 12 have different rights?
So we work with children aged 12 to 15 because that's what the legislation covers, and My Rights My Say is the support service that is named in the legislation to support that age range. So there is support available for children over 15 with Let's Talk ASN. For children under 12, there isn't a specific support service in place. So it would be thinking about looking at you know, more universal resources, or you know, taking the principles and looking at how they can be applied and work with younger ages. Would be my response. SJ, anything you would add to that?
Only that we can, if a young person is referred to My Rights My Say when they're 15, we can work until the case is concluded. So if they turn 16 within the sort of bounds of us working with them, we can carry on working with them. But yeah, Emma, you covered that perfectly.
Any other questions, Fenya?
Yes, plenty. And just kind of a keep it while you're answering the other ones, so bear with me. But someone's asked if you could explain whether the CSP is the same as a child's plan.
Do you want me to take that one, Emma?
Go for it.
So there's lots of names for children's support plans within school. So there can be an IEP, which is an individual education plan. There can be a child's plan. There's loads of different names. A coordinated support plan is a plan that's based in legislation, and as the young person's, that plan is then legal. So the education authority in the school have to comply with the support that's within the plan. Now, for a coordinated support plan, a young person needs school involvement, but also another agency. So that could be social work, or speech and language therapy, or a mental health. It could be sort of a range of things. But the idea for a coordinated support plan is that the support between school and the young person's additional support needs is coordinated to help them thrive and get the best from learning. So the CSP is it's a legal document, whereas there are loads of really good plans that school can put in place, but the CSP is the only one that's based in legality. Anything you want to add to that, Emma?
The only thing I would add to that is the reason that the CSP is the plan that is named in the legislation is because it's the statutory plan. So we would support children to be involved in all kinds of plans, but the CSP is the one that's named because it's the only statutory one, whereas a child's plan isn't a statutory plan. So that's just one of the, just to highlight that as a difference. And I think we've got, have we got an infographic coming out, SJ, about the differences in the types of plans?
I think we do, yep. I think it's in the works.
Yeah. So just keep your eyes peeled. My Rights My Say Twitter account, and we put our resources on our website as well, is that we're aware that that's a question that gets asked. So we have been working on an infographic that sets out the difference between the types of plans to kind of clarify that.
Someone's pointing out as well that parents and professionals can check on the Scottish Independent Advocacy Alliance website for available advocacy services in their local area. So we might find some services there for children that are younger or older than the 12 to 15-year-old age group. So thanks for pointing that out. Someone's asking, do you cover all of Scotland?
Yes. Yes, we do.
Quick and easy answer, yeah.
And actually, like we were saying, now that we are, moved to doing, because of the situation, we've had to move to doing more digital working. That's actually going to increase our capacity to do work across Scotland. Not that we didn't before, and I have, done 5-hour there and back trips to do an introductory visit, because that's a really important part of building a relationship. So if a child still preferred that face-to-face, when it's safe to do so, we would always strive to be able to offer that if that was what worked best for that child. But yeah, we do across Scotland.
Is bullying considered an ASN if it is impacting attendance at school and learning?
Yeah, indeed it is.
Absolutely.
In general, how aware do you think young people with additional support needs are being made aware of their rights and are being supported to express their views?
I think it varies from young person to young person, and I think that, I think it depends on how that's talked about at a school level, from whether parents and carers are aware, and that's something that they talk about. We have included at the end of the presentation some resources. One of the resources is a link to the REACH website, which is information specifically for children and young people about everything to do with additional support needs. It's sort of the children and young people facing side of Inquire. So that's a really good resource to point you towards, that kind of explains in a young person focused way about additional support needs and their rights. But that's one of the things that we've been tasked with doing, is kind of increasing awareness, and it takes a while for legislation like this to become embedded and for people to be using it across the board. So yeah, anything you would add to that, SJ?
No, you covered it perfectly.
Someone's asking, how do I make a referral? What's the...
There's a slide coming up which gives both parts of the service, how you can make a referral to both parts, or also on our website, if you're not sure what part of the service, there's some information there that you can sort of gain the right part of the service of what you want to refer to.
So I turned my camera off by accident for a second there, but I've moved to that slide so that you should be able to see. You should be able to see just now the contact information, and if you go to the website, there's a contact button at the top, and you can go through that, and that takes you through, and you can contact the most relevant part of the organisation.
So is this actually legislation now, or does it still have to be kind of like enshrined in Scottish law?
So the legislation is already in place for these rights for 12 to 15-year-olds, and has been since January 2018. What we're working towards in Scotland is incorporating the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, which would be rights that encompass all aspects of a child's life for everybody under the age of 18. So it'll be interesting to see the point that was made about younger children. It'll be interesting to see what support becomes available when all children have the legal right to be involved in decisions, and whether there are support services that come along with that. So that's going to be really interesting discussions over the next little while in Scotland.
Someone saying that a young person wants to contact My Rights, My Say, they currently have to provide a full name and contact details. They might not want to give you these details at the start. Is there a way for young people to contact you anonymously to get advice?
At the moment, there's not. The reason, sort of, again, if a young person is choosing to sort of exercise their rights, they have to want to be involved in it, and I can completely understand that it might be a really sort of anxiety-producing thing to do, to contact the service, but for us to be able to contact them and engage with them and sort of tell them about the service, we need to be able to contact them. So a name and phone number is sort of really needed at this point. I mean, recently we had a referral. The young person only likes to talk through email. There were specific things that we needed to know, so the young person gave us permission to speak to parents to get the sort of minutiae details to do a referral form for her. So we will always do what we can to support the individual young person, but sort of details like name and phone number and things, that stuff, we need to be able to contact them, and if they're wanting to use their rights, that's something we do need.
And also just to flag that while the advocacy service, like, it is driven by the child wanting that, they don't have to make the referral themselves. So it could be that if they're more comfortable, they could ask their parent or you know, a teacher or a professional to make that referral on their behalf. That doesn't take away from it being them kind of being the driving force behind that.
Just point out, because I know a few people probably are leaving soon, just a reminder to fill in your Menti evaluation. Also, yes, we will be sharing the slides with you and a link to resources after this webinar. And also, this has been recorded, and we're hoping to upload this to our Children's Scotland YouTube channel in the next week. So you should be able to access it and you listen to it. And again.
I'll just go back to the Menti information is here. If you haven't made note of it, if you just note down the code, I'll then just take you through so people can see the resources that we've flagged to as well. So that should be enough time for that. And then we've also got some resources. So we've got some Scottish Government guidance. We've got the Reach website, which I talked about, and the Inquire website, which is just an invaluable resource, and then some toolkits from other organisations, and a link to the additional support for learning review that's just been conducted by for the Scottish Government as well. So they're the resources that will be coming round to you. And there's also some other webinars coming up that you may be interested in, but all of that will be sent out to you on the slides. So I'll just pop back to the Menti details for you there.
Brilliant, thanks Emma. Someone just wants to clarify again what the difference is between the advocacy worker and the children's views worker.
So the difference really is whether it's the child saying, I would like to talk to my school about this part of my learning, and them saying, I'd like to take an active role in these decisions, or whether it's adults who are saying, this is something that needs to happen, this is a process that needs to happen, a plan that needs to be written, an assessment that needs to be done, a placing request, so maybe something that the child can't ask for themselves, and we would like to know these things from the child. So we have set questions, set issues that we would like to know from the child. So that's really the difference. It would be children's views come in to seek a child's views on specific issues related to a formal process, whereas advocacy can be much more driven by what the child wants, and I guess a little bit more, I don't want to use the word free flowing because that makes it sound like it's not focused, because it is very focused, but it is really driven by what that child wants. And it might start with initial conversations of just that child saying, something isn't working and I don't know what it is, but I want to do something about it.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Emma. That's very clear. I also asked to point out that the National Parent Forum of Scotland is a great resource and a great partner to get in touch with, especially when it comes to representing parents at the Scottish Government. and families who have children with additional support needs. So we'll try and add that to the resources as well, but you can find that on the Children in Scotland website, I think, under our partners and services, and there should be on there as well. But thanks so much for pointing that out. There's still a few more questions here.
Go for it.
So someone was asking if you work with looked after children in residential care settings as well.
Yes, absolutely. It's something that we really hope to expand. My Rights, My Say is the only service that's set up to sort of be able to help young people exercise these rights, and it's for all young people of all aspects of life within Scotland. So we definitely cover looked after and accommodated young people, and we would encourage them or carers to get in touch.
Mm-hmm. That's another thing, just to flag, going back to the previous question. If you're working with a child, or if you are the parent or carer of a child, and you think that My Rights, My Say could help, but you're not quite sure how, just get in touch, and we're always happy to talk through specific circumstances and give you advice and talk through the options, so we can work out how we can offer you the best support. Or even, you know, I'm having a conversation with a family next week just ahead of a meeting, and I'm not going to do a formal piece of work, but just, you know, thinking through how you might support your own child to be involved in a decision. So yeah, please get in touch with us.
Brilliant. Someone saying Whole Care Scotland, also a great organisation to get in touch with and provide advocacy services, especially for care experienced people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we know that there are lots and lots of support services out there, and yeah, Who Cares do fantastic work providing advocacy for looked after children and young people. Apologies that we haven't, the list of resources isn't you know, comprehensive, and it doesn't include everybody. You know, we would, as I pointed out before, if there's a Who Cares advocacy worker working with a child, but maybe you don't feel quite as confident around, you know, this side of the legislation, you're still wanting to provide advocacy for that child, and we wouldn't necessarily want to get, you know, lots of extra professionals involved, because we know that for looked after children, they have, you know, so many adults involved in their lives. But it might just be that you want to get in touch just to make sure that you know everything that you feel that you need to know to be able to provide the best advocacy you can for that child. So.
A few more questions coming through, flying in. There's a few questions with the, you know, the return to school after summer. If a parent or a child, you know, disagree on whether they want to return to school or not because of, you know, maybe health anxieties, different issues, what happens there legally? So what happens if a child, for example, wants to return to school, but their parent doesn't want them to do this because of fears about COVID? Do you have any advice?
It's a difficult one, isn't it?
The child wants to return, but the parent doesn't want them to return. I guess that would be having a conversation. I mean, about what the plan is for that child, and working out where the support needs are for the family as a whole. And I guess I sort of struggle with hypothetical situations to a degree, because I mean, it does really depend, you know, what the reasons are for that level of concern. What can the school say to maybe allay some of the parents' concerns, or is it because that there's a health need in the home, and you know that family is higher risk? So I would think it would be sort of exploring the specific circumstance of that family and working out what additional information or support can be provided. Would be my view.
Right. Anything to add, SJ?
Nothing at all. I think you've got it spot on. It's very, with hypotheticals, like it's very situational. But again, it's just going back to that sort of individual situation and working out what can help if there is information or a support plan that could be put in place. Totally agree with Emma.
Right. Someone's asking, why wouldn't advocacy be offered to the young person every time, even if they haven't initiated the discussion? They may still want advocacy and just not have had the chance to ask for it. And there's some questions there as well for some of the case study examples you had earlier. People wondered why it wouldn't always be an option.
I think it's then because, you know, with the Children's View Service, their views are still being taken into account that way. If, of course, if a young person wants advocacy, or a professional or parent thinks that their child would benefit from advocacy, they can make that referral, and then one of our advocacy workers would meet with that young person and determine whether it was something that the young person wanted or not. And absolutely, if it was something the young person wanted and they had views to share, that would be something that we would continue to work with them on. But again, it comes back to, there are some situations where there's some young people that might not have capacity to understand the rights, or that using the rights would impact on their well-being. In that case, it would be a case for Children's Views, if it was appropriate and not going to sort of affect their well-being even more.
Absolutely.
Something that the child has to want to take part in. It's got to be child-led. And for some young people, it's absolutely what they want, and for some young people, it's just not.
And so that point of, yeah, you only know what you know, so lots of children won't be able to ask for it, but it's absolutely something that we would encourage parents and carers and professionals to bring up as an option and talk them through, like you seem, you know, you really want to be involved with this, you know, did you know that you have a right to an advocate? Do you think that's something that you would want? Shall we make that referral?
Thank you both. Conscious of the time, please use Menti if you have more questions or comments. There's been a lot of great resources sent through and advice, and your own experiences there. Thanks everyone for sharing this and for asking those questions. As I said, we will be sending out a copy of the slides, and we'll make a recording of this available, and please feel free to share that with your networks. And with the families you're working with, you know, with colleagues and everyone really, definitely, and you know, point them in the right direction. Thanks so much again. The questions we haven't answered, I'll pass them on to Emma and SJ, and we'll try and pull some resources together. The slides won't be in your inbox today. We're a bit understaffed at the moment. It'll take a few days, hopefully sometime next week. So bear with us. But no, really appreciate everyone coming along today. Please check out our Eventbrite page, because we're running more webinars, another few free webinars, also focused on supporting children and young people with additional support needs. The next one there being on Tuesday, but also a range of other valuable training courses that we've moved online. So please have a look. childrenscotland.eventbrite.co.uk. Have a look at our own website, or just search for it on Google and you'll find it. And yeah, we'll hope to see you again soon. Thank you so much, Emma and SJ, for running this webinar today. And I think that was your first, well, Emma, this is your second webinar, isn't it?
Yes, this is my second.
And Sarah Jane, your first one.
My first, yeah.
Well done, well done. Everyone, thanks for the lovely comments you're sending through as well.
Yeah, thanks for the comments and getting so engaged in the conversation. It makes all the difference.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Absolutely. Right, that brings us to an end. We'll close the webinar just now. And yes, if you need to get in touch, please email us. Thank you, everyone. And
thank you.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.